At 40,000 feet, with the horizon split between burning sunlight and the cold blue void, her jet suddenly snapped into a violent spin so severe it felt as if gravity itself had turned against her. The cockpit shook with a brutal, metallic fury, alarms screaming like wounded animals, and in that terrifying instant, Captain Elena Reyes realized she was falling, not just from the sky, but from everything she had ever fought to become. The world outside the canopy spun in a dizzying spiral of clouds and empty space, and for the first time since she had taken the oath to fly, she felt truly, devastatingly powerless. But the world would soon learn that this moment of hopelessness would become the beginning of the most daring survival the Air Force had ever witnessed. Her career had never been easy. Elena had grown up in a small, dusty border town where jets were seen only as distant streaks of silver slicing across the sky. She had watched them from her rooftop, imagining the stories of the people inside them, stories of challenge, discipline, and impossible dreams. Her father had been a mechanic, spending his life repairing broken things while quietly battling a heart condition he never wanted his children to worry about. Elena remembered him telling her that machines only looked strong, it was the human spirit that held the real power. Those words had followed her into adulthood like a compass needle always pointing upward. Even when money was scarce, even when people said, "Women don't make it far in fighter wings," even when she had to work twice as hard to prove she deserved her place among the best, she never let go of the sky. Her reputation grew through years of relentless training. She was precise, calm under pressure, and known for pushing herself until sweat burned her eyes and her muscles trembled. But beneath that iron discipline lived a heart that carried the weight of loss. Her father had died right as she earned her flight certification. The grief had carved through her like a blade, leaving behind a silence that she learned to bury beneath late-night flights, engine hums, and the sharp smell of jet fuel. She flew not just for herself, she flew for him, for the dream he had once shared with her, and for every moment he had patched together a life from broken bolts and worn-out tools. Now, years later, she was one of the most trusted pilots in her unit. That morning had begun like any other training operation. Clear skies, steady atmospheric conditions, and a mission designed to test high-altitude maneuver readiness. Nothing unusual. But the world above 40,000 feet does not need a reason to betray you. At that altitude, a single mechanical fault, a tiny shift in airflow, or even a misread input can turn the sky into a battlefield. It began with a vibration, small at first, like the hum of tension before a storm. Then came the jolt, violent enough to slam her helmet against the seat cushion. The right stabilizer had malfunctioned, sending the aircraft into an uncontrollable spin. Her jet twisted like a leaf caught in a hurricane, rotating so violently that blood pulled at her limbs, distorting her vision and slowing her thoughts. The plane was no longer flying, it was plummeting, broken, wild, and moments away from becoming a streak of debris in the wilderness below. Panic clawed at the edges of her mind. She fought it with everything she had, trying every recovery maneuver she had ever been taught. Nose down, thrust cut, rudder correction, nothing worked. The spin only tightened, the sky whipping past like a monstrous blur. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized what the instruments were telling her. The rate of descent was accelerating, the controls were unresponsive, and the structural stress alarm had begun flashing a deep, unforgiving red. She was seconds from the point of no return. But Elena was not the kind of pilot who surrendered her fate to fear. Somewhere inside the spin, buried under the chaos, she found the voice she had carried since childhood, her father's voice, reminding her that machines could lose their strength, but humans were built to fight beyond their limits. She took a breath so deep it felt like she was inhaling the entire sky. The G-forces made her ribs feel like cracking glass, but she forced her mind into absolute focus. If conventional methods failed, she needed something unconventional, something no one had ever trained her for. There was one possibility. A high-risk maneuver so extreme and untested that it existed only in theory, a controlled asymmetrical thrust roll reversal. It was a technique meant to counteract an unrecoverable spin by using the aircraft's own instability against itself, forcing the jet into a momentary aerodynamic stall that could reset airflow. It had never been attempted at high altitude. It had never been recorded as successful. And if she miscalculated by a fraction, the jet would rip apart midair. But there, spinning 40,000 feet above America, where the ground raced upward like a silent monster and the sky seemed determined to swallow her whole, Elena Reyes decided she would not die running from fear. She would meet it head-on. She cut her primary thrust completely, something no pilot ever does in a spin that severe, letting the jet lose the little stability it still clung to. Then she slammed full power into the opposite engine, feeling the aircraft twist with a violence so fierce it felt like the wings might shear off. The cockpit screamed with warnings. The airframe groaned with the weight of its own betrayal. The spin doubled for a moment, then tripled, each rotation stronger, more brutal, more unbearable. But then, a flicker. A break in the spiral. A hesitation in the chaos. She seized that single heartbeat of stillness, yanking the control column with the last ounces of strength she still had, and forced the jet into the stall she prayed would save her. The aircraft lurched. It shook. It felt like the world was cracking open around her. And then, silence. The spin stopped. The jet leveled. Her breath collapsed into a sob of disbelief as the instrument panel steadied and the horizon returned to its rightful place. She had done it. She had achieved the impossible. She had pulled off a maneuver that had existed only as a theoretical footnote in aviation history, and she had done it while plummeting to her death. Her hands trembled as she steered the aircraft toward base. Her body was drained, her muscles shaking from the strain, sweat slipping silently down her temples. But as she flew, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a profound, overwhelming sense of connection to her father. As if somewhere, in some quiet place between earth and sky, he had guided her hands. She whispered into the empty cockpit, not expecting an answer, but feeling the weight of his memory settle into her heart with a warmth she had almost forgotten. She wasn't flying alone. She never had been. When she landed, the runway seemed brighter than she remembered. The mechanics rushed forward, speechless at the sight of a jet that should have been scrap metal scattered across mountains. Her commander stared at her like she had stepped out of a legend. But Elena didn't care about the attention. What mattered was that she had proven something far bigger than skill or training. She had proven the strength of human will, the kind that refuses to break even when the world is spinning out of control. Her report would be studied for decades. Pilots would train using simulations based on her impossible maneuver. She would become the woman who rewrote survival in the sky. But to her, the greatest victory was the simplest one. She had looked fear in the face and refused to let it claim her life or her dream. And she knew her father would have been proud. If this story touched your heart or gave you even a moment of inspiration, I humbly ask you to support this video with your love. Your engagement truly keeps stories like this alive. Special request to comment. Share a moment in your life when you refused to give up, even when everything seemed impossible.